Every year, this apple farmer produces 1 million pounds of apples. 1 million pounds. But he's got a problem. Every year, the apple price jumps around a bunch. Sometimes it sells after the harvest for over 30 cents, and this guy makes a ton of money per pound. And then sometimes it drops down to 10 cents per pound, and this guy can't even cover his costs. And on the other side of the equation, you have this pie chain right over here. So they specialize in making apple pies. And when the price of apples goes super high, these guys can't cover their costs. They start running a loss. But when the price goes really low, they have this kind of bonanza. But neither party here likes this scenario. They don't like the unpredictability of 1 year having a feast and then 1 year having a famine. So what they can do is, let's say we have the harvest coming up. The pie farmer is kind of afraid. Well, what if the price of pies goes back down to 10 cents per pound? Then he's going to go broke. The pie chain is afraid. What if the price of pies goes up to 30 cents a pound? Then these guys are going to go broke. So what they can do is agree ahead of time, regardless of what the actual market price of pies ends up being after the harvest. They could agree to transact at a specified price. So they could set up a little contract right here. So they could set up a contract where the chain agrees to buy 1 million pounds at a specified date, let's just say after the harvest, for 20 cents a pound. 20 cents a pound. This works out well for the chain because they can ensure, regardless of what the market price ends up being, they can ensure that they will pay 20 cents a pound, which is a good price where they can make a decent profit, and at least they have the predictability and they can plan on things. And it works out for the farmer because he knows that at 20 cents a pound, he can cover his costs and pay his rent and pay his employees and feed his family. And it also takes out the unpredictability, the volatility for him as well. So what we have set up right here is actually called a forward contract. This is a forward contract. And what it is, as you can see, is an agreement, and it's an obligation for both parties to transact in the future at a specified price. So at the time of this harvest, they would specify, when they write this contract, they would specify this date. I don't know what it might be, November 15th. And at November 15th, this farmer is obligated to deliver 1 million pounds of apples. And then this pie chain is obligated to produce the money, to pay 20 cents a pound, or essentially produce $200,000. And that way, they both are essentially able to avoid the volatility and make sure that they can survive. After the farmer and the pie chain get involved in this forward contract, a few questions start to pop up in each of their minds. The main one is, what if the other party isn't able to uphold their end of the contract? And this is called counterparty risk. Counterparty risk, which is essentially the counterparty to the farmer is the pie store, and the counterparty to the pie chain is the farmer. And it's the risk that the other party won't be able to uphold their end of the contract. The other thing that starts to worry either one of these is, what if they start to have second thoughts about this forward contract that they entered into? Would they be able to maybe sell their obligation to someone else? So is there any way to trade the contract? And then there's another issue, that even if you were to trade the contract, how do we know that the other party to the whoever you might want to trade with would be cool with 1 million pounds or $200,000? Maybe they would want to deal with a smaller quantity. Maybe they would only want 1,000 pounds or $100,000 worth of apples. So the local brain comes up with an idea. He's like, why don't we standardize these forward contracts? Why don't I just create a bunch of contracts whenever someone wants to enter into one of these forward contracts, but I standardize them. And I say that it is 1,000, instead of having 1 million apples, I do a small enough increment. So I say 1,000 pounds of apples for delivery on, let's say, November on November 15th. And every one of these contracts say the same thing: 1,000 pounds of apples for delivery on 11/15. And this guy, he's also the richest guy in town. He's already been running a stock exchange. And so to help alleviate the counterparty risk fear, he also says that I'm going to guarantee. I will guarantee any of these contracts. So essentially, he's taking on all of the counterparty risk to make people more comfortable with trading. So all of a sudden what happens is that now these guys don't have to do a one-off contract. They don't have to do this one-off forward contract. There are these standardized contracts that this exchange can now trade. And what happens is that smaller farmers, so small, let me do this in a different color. You have farmers, farmer A, farmer B. Farmer B can now transact with, I should say, I guess we could call it customer C and customer D, where they could agree to have a fixed price, but they could do smaller increments, more granular increments. And if any of them want to get out of it, they can by selling their contract to another person on the exchange. And these more standardized forward contracts, they're still essentially the same thing. They're just standardized. They're agreements to transact at a future date, give a certain amount of money for a certain amount of something else. It could be a security. It could be apples. These things, these standardized forward contracts, these are called futures, where they're standardized and they are traded on an exchange. You might be wondering why the exchange would be willing to take on the counterparty risk for people exchanging these kind of standardized futures contracts. And the first reason is that the exchange actually stands to make a lot of money. What he can do is tell these people who want to buy apples in the future, he could say, for example, hey, you can enter into a futures contract with a settlement price of 22 cents per pound. So that's what they're going to have to come to the table with. So that is 22 cents per pound. And he could tell the people who are going to deliver the apples that when you deliver the apples, the settlement price is 20 cents per pound. Is 20 cents per pound. And so essentially, when the settlement occurs, he's going to be able to make a 2-cent profit. He's going to make a 2-cent profit. Let me review that again. If he only has to pay these guys 20 cents a pound for the apples, and these guys are paying 22 cents a pound for the apples, and maybe I should make this arrow go in this direction because this is the flow of the actual money. If these guys are going to pay 22 cents for the apples, and then as the exchange, this guy only has to give 20 cents to the farmers, he's going to make 2 cents profit. And on futures contracts, on 1,000 pounds of apples, that's going to be $20 for each of those contracts. So that's going to be $20 per contract. And he's going to be doing this night and day, trading with all of the different farmers and all of the different customers and even some speculators who might want to do this. So maybe if the spread, he kind of can maintain this 2-cent spread, he'll keep making $20 every time one of these future contracts exchange hands. Now, the other way that he's going to protect himself against losses is he's going to make each of these parties set aside some money in case the futures contract price moves against them. And this money that they have to set aside is called margin. And I'll explain this in more detail in a future video. But what it essentially is the amount of money that this guy, or the largest amount that this guy thinks that the futures price might move by, the contract price might move by in any given day. And so he has a cushion. He can actually use the margin as kind of insurance. So he can make sure that on the settlement date, both parties will kind of be able to meet their obligations. And I'll go into more detail that on the next video on exactly how margin works.